After completing his college entrance exams, my son, Ethan, was thrilled to receive an acceptance letter from a prestigious university. He immediately rushed to his father's house to share the exciting news. Meanwhile, I lay confined to my bed, battling a severe illness with no one to care for me. In my final moments, I called Ethan and told him that I was dying. "Not my problem," he replied coldly. "You made my life miserable for 3 years. You deserve this." When I finally passed away, the local community committee struggled to contact him. Eventually, they managed to get through and asked, "Do you still want to go to college? If you don't come, we'll inform your school about your situation." Reluctantly, Ethan arrived to collect my ashes. His indifference infuriated a neighbor, who scolded him. "Your mother worked tirelessly for 3 years at a small stall to support your studies. Is this how you repay her? You're an ungrateful child, Ethan." He merely scoffed. "My dad owns a big business. My stepmom is a corporate executive, and my grandma spoils me. Why should I care about her? If she worked herself to death, that's on her." Hovering above, my spirit twisted in rage. "You ungrateful brat. Are you blind? If they loved you so much, why did they manipulate the custody battle to take you from me?" But he didn't acknowledge me. Clutching the urn impatiently, he walked away. Even when I was alive, he never listened to me. I could only watch as he left the neighborhood, glanced around, and then tossed my urn into a trash bin like it was worthless. Brushing off his hands, he sneered, "Finally, no one can control me anymore." Pulling out his phone, he eagerly joined an online game. "All right, let's team up," he exclaimed. At that moment, a sorrow deeper than death itself washed over me. I had no tears left. What had I been holding on to? I watched him play game after game, oblivious to the world, until night fell. Then, for a brief moment, his face paled, and his brows furrowed. I thought perhaps he finally realized he had lost his mother. But instead, he muttered in irritation, "Why hasn't Grandma called yet? I'm starving." That was the final blow. My love for him drained away completely. I detached myself from the pain, finally accepting the truth. Ethan had resented me for years. When he was in 10th grade, he begged me to buy a $60 in-game item. When I refused, he flew into a rage, shoving and hitting me. If I lived with Dad, I could have anything I wanted. "You're broke, so why do you even try to parent me?" He pushed me so hard that I hit the corner of the table and started bleeding. Without a glance back, he stormed off. I spent the whole night searching for him, only for him to return the next day, smugly showing off the 10 in-game items his father had bought him, along with brand new clothes and shoes. Earlier still, after failing to get into a top high school, I suggested he repeat a year. "I'd rather die than be held back. It's humiliating," he yelled before running off to his father. Ryan immediately agreed and enrolled him in a mediocre school instead. Feeling triumphant, Ethan returned to gloat. "Only Dad knows how to fix my problems." He never realized that without my relentless supervision over his studies for 3 years, he wouldn't have even come close to passing his college entrance exams, let alone getting into a prestigious university. No matter how much I sacrificed, it could never compare to the occasional gifts and luxuries his father's family provided. To Ethan, I had always been the obstacle preventing him from living the wealthy life he believed he deserved. Bitter anger welled inside me. All my efforts, all my love, had been discarded like trash. My short life had been wasted on a son who despised me. I thought I would carry this resentment into my next life. But then suddenly, I heard Ethan's furious voice. "Don't drag me into this, you loser." I moved instinctively. Sharp ceramic shards pierced my feet. Staring at the acne-covered face of my teenage son, I froze. Slowly, realization dawned. I had been reborn. This was the day of his high school entrance exams. The day I discovered Ryan's betrayal and decided to divorce him. Fate had given me another chance. Warmth spread through my hands, and my heart pounded fiercely. Struggling to suppress my emotions, I said calmly, "I don't have a job or an income. The court won't grant me custody." Ryan looked at me in shock. "Jessica, what are you saying? Didn't you find a job that pays $10,000 a month?" Ethan stormed toward me, defiance twisting his features. "Yeah. What kind of nonsense is this? You can't just abandon me." I let out a cold laugh, remembering my past life. Back then, I had overheard my co-workers gossiping about our company's HR manager, Donna. Donna is so cunning, someone had said. She helped the ex-wife get a job and then used it to make sure the husband won custody. 2 birds with 1 stone. She got rid of the troublesome ex and married the guy cleanly. Genius. Only then did I realize Donna had manipulated me. She had arranged for me to take a job I wasn't qualified for, knowing I'd eventually be fired. I had swallowed my pride and humiliation for survival, never confronting her. But days later, she discarded me just as planned, claiming I wasn't a good fit. People who didn't know the truth assumed I had gotten the job through nepotism and cheered when I was fired. My reputation was ruined. My spirit crushed. Now, as Ethan stood before me, ready to lash out, I remained calm. No matter what tricks you play, I won't fight for custody. Ethan scoffed. Who pays a nanny $10,000 a month? That's ridiculous. I smiled faintly. My heart had grown cold. Under the influence of Ryan and his mother, Ethan had been conditioned to see me as insignificant. Your dad and Donna have stable finances. I trust you'll be fine with them. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, his expression confused. Donna is a high-caliber person, I added. She'll treat you like her own. His face brightened. Exactly. Donna and I get along great. She understands me and even buys me in-game items. She told me I had talent and would achieve success someday. I didn't see the point in arguing. Ryan, however, became visibly anxious. He crossed his arms and paced back and forth. Jessica, didn't you once say that if Donna had a child of her own, it could complicate things between the siblings? He asked, suspicion in his voice. What are you up to now? He still clung to the fantasy of ridding himself of both Ethan and me, hoping for a carefree life with Donna. His plan was to ensure I walked away with nothing. I gave him a sincere smile and apologized. I was too narrow-minded before. I'm sorry. I trust you'll take good care of Ethan and that Donna will treat him fairly. Ryan was momentarily speechless. Ethan, on the other hand, smirked as if to say, Finally, you understand your place. Calmly, I picked up a pen, added a few clauses to the divorce agreement, and handed it to Ryan. I have proof of your affair with Donna, I said evenly. I don't want the house or the car. All I ask for is $120,000 in cash. I had no interest in prolonging this battle. I just wanted to take what I could and leave. Besides, in a few years, the house's value might decline anyway. My decisiveness caught Ryan off guard. He tried to use Ethan to pressure me, but I cut him off. Didn't you always claim to love Ethan the most? I asked. Are you really going to argue about money in front of him? It was the same tactic he had used against me before, assuming I would back down. This time, I wanted to see how he'd maintain his refined facade before Ethan. Surprisingly, Ethan spoke up indifferently. Dad, just give it to her. You and Donna can always earn more. Just make sure the agreement states that she can't visit me. Consider it a payment for peace of mind. Ryan's face darkened, but he forced a sinister smile. Jessica, I know you hate me and want to make me suffer. Fine, I'll pay. Just don't go back on your word. I rolled my eyes and signed the documents without hesitation. Ryan instinctively reached to grab the pen from me, but I sighed and turned to Ethan. Ethan, it seems your father doesn't value you as much as you thought. Ethan's expression changed. He stood up demanding, Dad, what does she mean by that? Just agree already. Ryan hesitated, torn between his desire to hold on to the money and his need to protect Donna. The amount I was asking for represented their entire family's savings. But in the end, he had no choice. I smirked and added pointedly, By the way, wasn't it Donna who arranged that job for me? Funny how a housewife with no professional background managed to secure a department manager position at H Group's design department. Maybe I should have a word with the boss about that. Ryan's face turned pale. He quickly interrupted. Fine. Just give me a few days to think. I let out a bitter laugh. What? You need Donna's approval before she's even moved in. If you delay, my terms will change. Trapped by my words and with Ethan watching, Ryan finally agreed. I planned to drag him to the civil affairs office immediately to finalize the divorce. Just as I insisted, Donna called him in a panic, claiming she was bleeding. Father and son rushed out in a frenzy, their retreating figures almost pathetic. But I wasn't in a hurry. Unlike my past life, I was no longer shackled by a child. If Donna's family thought they could manipulate me into taking Ethan back so they could live their perfect life, they were dreaming. As soon as they left, I packed my belongings and moved out, diving straight into my new life. From the moment I was reborn, I had a plan. In my previous life, I entered the workforce in my 30s with no experience, struggling against younger, more qualified candidates. I faced humiliation and failure. Eventually, I turned to street vending, but even that industry had become competitive, with college graduates using trendy products and technology to outshine me. Back then, my only advantage was my determination. I worked longer hours than anyone else, running between multiple stalls to sell out my inventory. And even after exhausting days, I still came home to help Ethan with his studies. My health deteriorated as a result. This time, I was more self-aware. Instead of blindly competing in oversaturated markets, I chose a field where I could naturally excel: household management. I was still relatively young, had a degree from a prestigious university, and knew how to manage a home. What others saw as weaknesses, I could turn into strengths. In my past life, I had heard that Helen Grant, the general manager of a company, was a single father with a daughter entering high school. He had once sought recommendations for a reliable, high-level housekeeper to handle household management and tutor his daughter. The salary he offered was a generous $5,000 per month. I had considered applying after losing my job, but Ethan had thrown a fit, threatening to harm himself if I became a lowly nanny. On top of that, I hadn't studied in years and doubted my ability to tutor a high school student. Now, none of that mattered. Confidently, I called Helen Grant and introduced myself as someone referred by his company. He asked for my qualifications. I responded, during my college entrance exams, I scored 652. If I were to take the test again today, I could guarantee a score no lower than that. As I spoke, a wave of bitterness filled my heart. Back then, I wasn't just a top student. I was also known for my beauty, admired by many. From school uniforms to a wedding dress, Ryan and I had been together for years. But after more than a decade as a housewife, I had grown older, heavier, and lost the brilliance I once had. In my past life, after Ethan took his college entrance exams, I quietly tested myself at home and astonishingly scored 680. Every point reflected my deep love for him. Yet, in the end, he discarded me like trash. When it came to teaching methods, I was more than willing to prove my abilities in person. I spoke with unwavering confidence. Even my own son, rebellious as he was, had secured a place in a prestigious university under my guidance. I couldn't imagine there being a student I couldn't teach. Helen then inquired about my experience in household management. I forced a wry smile. Would 16 years as a live-in nanny count? I asked. My expertise ranged from preparing meals single-handedly while holding a child, eating while multitasking, mopping floors with a baby in tow, and even managing to prepare milk or change diapers in my sleep. If necessary, I could stay awake for days to care for a sick or fussy baby. Helen chuckled at my words. Miss Jessica, you certainly have a sharp wit. I can see that you're both resilient and hardworking. I returned her smile, though my laughter carried a trace of sorrow. Never underestimate a woman who has been forged in the fires of family life, Mr. Grant. Helen seemed to develop a favorable first impression of me, agreeing to meet in person to discuss further. However, despite our pleasant conversation, he voiced some concerns. I have a daughter about to enter high school, he explained. If you had certifications in nutrition, health management, or household services, it would strengthen your application. His words sparked a renewed determination in me. Perhaps a second chance was still within reach. The moment we ended the call, I enrolled in courses: massage therapy, childcare, medicinal cooking. I even signed up for fitness and yoga training. Private lessons cost $70 an hour. But I didn't hesitate. This time I was learning to invest in myself. At this point in life, I understood one truth. Relying on myself was far better than depending on anyone else. Besides, I was still technically a housewife spending Ryan's money. If I didn't use it now, it would just go to waste. It wasn't long before Ryan called, demanding that I return home to finalize our divorce. The moment I stepped inside, I sensed the brewing storm. My mother-in-law, usually occupied with her dance group, was actually home for once. The second she saw me, she launched into a tirade. How could you walk away over something so trivial? What about me and Ethan? Don't we need to eat? Ethan, entirely indifferent, merely shrugged. If she doesn't want to cook, then don't. Grandma, we've been ordering takeout lately. It's been great, especially the fried chicken. My mother-in-law faltered, her face twisting with anger. I glanced at Ethan's acne-ridden face, feeling nothing at all. The kitchen sink reeked of unwashed dishes, and the trash overflowed. Ignoring the mess, I wiped the dust off a chair, sat down and said with a smirk, Mom, why not save your energy for training your new daughter-in-law? Even on the day of my divorce, after cooking for you for over a decade, you still won't let me off the hook. She slammed her cleaning cloth down, pointing at me with fury. Jessica, no wonder Ethan refuses to deal with you. You're nothing but negativity. I remained unfazed. I never intended to fight for custody. Ryan cheated, and you expect me to take Ethan with me so they can live happily ever after? I'm not that naive. Her face turned an alarming shade of green. I continued, my voice even. Keeping Ethan here to make their lives miserable? That I'm more than happy to do. She sputtered at a loss for words, before dramatically clutching her chest. What a disgrace. Jessica, you're just taking your anger out on him, she accused. Poor Ethan is innocent in all this. Aren't you worried he'll cut ties with you one day and refuse to care for you when you're old? I let out a cold laugh. In my past life, he threw my ashes into the trash. Cutting ties? Refusing to support me? That's nothing. My tone was sharp as I continued. Thanks to all of you, he grew up believing I was the villain. You painted yourselves as saints while tearing me down. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. Consider Ethan my parting gift. Raising my voice, I called toward the bedroom. Ryan, didn't you call me back to finalize the divorce? What are you hiding for? After a long pause, the bedroom door finally opened. Ryan stepped out, supporting Donna, whose belly had yet to show any signs of pregnancy. My mother-in-law rushed forward in a panic. Oh dear, be careful. We can't risk anything happening to my precious grandson. Ethan, visibly annoyed, threw his phone onto the couch. Grandma, you already have a grandson. And besides, it's still so early. How do you even know it's a boy? Donna offered a sweet yet pointed smile. Ethan, I went to Hong Kong for a checkup. It's a boy. Ryan's expression darkened. Ethan, is that any way to talk to Donna? Stop barging around the house like that. My mother-in-law chimed in. Ethan, you need to start looking after your little brother. Now, clean up this mess. Ethan kicked the coffee table hard, spun on his heel, and stormed off. Whoever made the mess can clean it up. I'm not doing it. He slammed his bedroom door so hard that the entire house shook. Ryan's face reddened with anger, disappointment flickering in his eyes. My mother-in-law quickly turned to console Donna. He's just a child. Donna, I'll talk to him later. He just needs time to adjust. You and Ryan have such a wonderful relationship. He'll come around. Donna's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she nodded, sitting down with a wounded expression. But as Ethan turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of the venomous glint in his eyes as he looked at Donna's stomach. That look said it all. In my previous life, I had taken Ethan with me before Donna revealed her child's gender, afraid of how he would react to his father and grandmother's blatant favoritism. Ethan, selfish as he was, would never tolerate a younger sibling taking the spotlight. Back then, I had shielded him from the truth, unwilling to shatter his illusions. To him, I had been the source of every burden in the household, while his grandmother was a carefree, elegant woman, and his father a refined, good-natured provider. But this time, I was done playing the martyr. This was about to get ugly. We'd all get our hands dirty. Why should I be the only one to suffer? After watching the spectacle unfold, I turned to Ryan, my voice calm but deliberate. Regarding the assets, our agreement had already been settled. Why not just get it over with today? I suggested. Let's go to the Civil Affairs office. Seated beside Ryan, Donna smoothly interjected, Jessica, isn't it customary for divorcing couples to discuss custody before dividing assets? I raised an eyebrow, shifting my gaze between Ryan and Ethan. I thought we had already reached a consensus on that matter. What's your concern? Donna forced a polite laugh, though her tone lacked sincerity. Of course, I'd love for Ethan to stay. Ryan and I both would. But as a woman, I have to admit I'd prefer to have my own child with us. She glanced at me, her words dripping with veiled criticism. Jessica, I just didn't expect you to be so comfortable leaving Ethan behind. I offered a faint smile, unfazed. Donna, you've raised a child before. You're not some inexperienced girl. I trust you'll take good care of him. Her expression stiffened, and she shot a quick look at Ryan, whose subtle shake of the head didn't go unnoticed. That was when I realized they had brought her here to gauge my reaction, to see if I truly intended to relinquish custody. Just then, Ethan emerged from his room for a glass of water. Though he acted casual, I could tell he was paying close attention to our conversation. Donna glanced at Ethan, then turned back to me, her tone now carrying a hint of provocation. Jessica, we're both divorced mothers raising children. Forgive me for being blunt, but kids usually do better with their mothers. When I raised my daughter alone, it was tough, but I persevered. I'm not bragging, just stating the truth. Fathers tend to be less attentive. You've raised Ethan all these years. Are you really okay with letting him go? Before I could respond, Ethan stormed over, pointing an accusatory finger at Donna. Why are you trying to get rid of me? Didn't you say you liked me and wanted to be my mom? Donna's face froze, caught between irritation and embarrassment. She had hoped to sow discord between Ethan and me, but her plan had backfired spectacularly. Ethan's resentment toward me already ran deep. He blamed me for not giving him the affluent, picture-perfect life he envisioned with his father. Now, seeing Donna try to replace him only fueled his anger. He escalated. You brought your daughter here to enjoy a good life, and now you want to kick me out? What's your deal? If you keep this up, I won't help you anymore. His defiant stance made it seem as if he had caught Donna in the act, holding her accountable. I almost laughed. My foolish son, before, Donna had been careful with him, humoring and indulging his whims because she was a single mother herself. But now, with her unborn child as her trump card, she carried herself with a newfound confidence. Though visibly unsettled, Donna forced a smile. Ethan, how could I ever want to push you away? I like you too much for that. I'm only concerned that your mother might not prioritize you in the future. Ethan barely spared me a glance. As long as you and Dad like me, that's all that matters. One less person doesn't make a difference. Donna turned to me with a smug look, but I remained entirely composed. I shrugged and said, nice try, but reverse psychology won't work on me. Then, with exaggerated enthusiasm, I gave her a thumbs up. Donna, you've set a new standard for stepmothers. I'm impressed. Ryan, losing patience, stood up abruptly. Enough. Jessica, I never realized you were this cruel and sarcastic. Isn't this just about you wanting money instead of Ethan? Fine. I'll give you what you want. His mother chimed in, jabbing a finger at me. Think carefully. If you walk out that door, you and Ethan will have nothing to do with each other anymore. Don't come crying later. It won't work. Watching their anger boil over, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Finally, it was their turn to feel powerless. Donna, however, wasn't done. How is it fair that a stay-at-home mom who hasn't earned a cent gets so much? We have to raise our own child soon while she just walks away without a care. I merely smiled at Ryan. His face darkened as he pulled Donna aside, whispering something to her. Not one to back down, Donna returned with fire in her eyes. What? Are you going to sue me now? I'm a senior employee at the company. At worst, you might expose some minor negligence, but I can sue you for falsifying your resume. I'll make sure no HR department in this industry ever hires you again. Back when Donna's family had arranged my job, the entire thing had been a setup. I had never even submitted a resume. Her threat was an empty intimidation tactic. I slowly pulled out my phone. Well then, perhaps I should call Helen Grant and clarify how I got the job. Imagine that, a mistress going out of her way to help the ex-wife land employment. I'm sure Mr. Grant would be eager to reward such generosity. Donna's sneer faltered for a fraction of a second. She was shameless, but when I casually recited Helen Grant's direct phone number, her expression shifted instantly. Enough, she snapped, visibly rattled. I'm not arguing with you anymore. I wasn't interested in arguing either. I had endured everything until that red divorce certificate was finally in my hands. Walking out with a sharp smile, I spoke slowly and deliberately. Donna, make sure you treasure your position as HR director at H Group. Her lips trembled with rage, hatred burning in her eyes, but I simply offered a light smile and left with confidence. Ethan didn't even look at me. Instead, he sat with the family, completely absorbed in their warm embrace. Fine. If Donna was so skilled at winning them over, I was curious to see how well my ungrateful son would fit into their perfect new life. After the divorce, I returned to my apartment, indulging in a long hot bath before collapsing onto my soft bed. A wave of relief washed over me, and I wanted to scream with joy. This was what life was supposed to feel like. From that moment, my days were filled with training sessions and fitness routines. I felt sharp, energetic, alive. Even the breeze outside carried a sweetness. With $80,000 in my account, I finally had the resources to reinvent myself. I would become a top-tier personal housekeeper. Who said being a domestic worker couldn't be a path to success? Others may have seen it as disgraceful, but I was determined to prove them wrong by surpassing all expectations. The first time I met my personal trainer, a young, tall and well-built man, I felt a long-forgotten spark stir within me. As we recorded my fitness stats, I couldn't ignore the deep embarrassment I felt over how much I had neglected my body. For years, I had failed to treat myself with the care and respect I deserved. Within just a week, I shed over 15 pounds. Starting from rock bottom, even the smallest progress felt monumental. Every improvement gave me renewed hope. Like an old tree sprouting new leaves, I rediscovered the excitement I once felt in my college days, the ambition and drive to conquer the world. I made a vow to achieve my peak condition, both physically and professionally. Within 2 months of my first interview, I had earned multiple certifications in nutrition and household management, all while achieving impressive fitness results. I had to replace my workout attire 4 times as I dropped through several clothing sizes. My transformation became so noticeable that the gym's management took an interest. They were expanding and wanted to feature me in their next promotional campaign. Ms. Jessica, your transformation perfectly embodies our upcoming theme, rising from adversity. We'd love to use your photos and videos for marketing, and we're even considering filming a few commercials featuring you. The manager's enthusiasm was evident. I gave a slight smile and responded calmly, $5,000. The manager hesitated, surprised. That's not within our budget. How about 30 hours of private training instead? Then we don't have a deal, I stated firmly. That price is already discounted. Seeing me prepare to leave, the manager quickly blocked my path, forcing a smile. Miss Jessica, let's negotiate. How about 50 hours? Consider it a goodwill gesture for Trainer Sue. I pushed his hand away and met his gaze with an icy stare. If that's your approach, then forget it. Do you think I've never encountered men before? I'm not interested. I was well aware that this gym attracted a certain type of clientele, middle-class housewives looking for more than just fitness training. But I had no time for such nonsense. Men, as a whole, were something I had chosen to avoid permanently. After all, I was a woman who had willingly given up custody of her own son. Realizing I wasn't bluffing, the manager eventually apologized. A few days later, $5,000 appeared in my bank account. What I didn't anticipate was the overwhelming success of the campaign. The gym's membership skyrocketed, and one afternoon in the lounge, I ran into Helen Grant. He had joined the gym and was there for his workout. His eyes swept over me, filled with open admiration. When I saw the ad, I thought it looked just like you, he remarked with a small smile. I didn't expect it was actually you. With confidence, I gave him a brief update on the certifications I had earned. He nodded in approval. Good. The school year is about to start. I'll arrange a time for an in-home interview. Coincidentally, Helen had also chosen Trainer Sue, meaning our paths crossed more frequently. Our interactions remained professional and reserved, and I was careful to maintain that boundary. Securing a high-paying position in household management was my primary focus, and Helen Grant represented a significant step toward that goal. Through our conversations, I gradually learned more about Helen's family situation. Both he and his ex-wife were ambitious professionals. When she was assigned to oversee a branch in Hong Kong, Their relationship began to drift apart. She flourished in her career and ultimately decided to settle permanently overseas, while Helen chose to stay and grow his business. After years of trying to make it work, they had divorced earlier this year, with their child remaining in Helen's care. During one candid discussion, Helen commented, "If either of us had been more like you, Jessica, someone willing to put family first, maybe things would have turned out differently." I let out a bitter smile. If my ex-husband hadn't crossed certain lines, I would have endured the hardships to keep our family together. Helen chuckled softly. It seems all the good men and women end up in someone else's home. Sensing the conversation drifting into dangerous territory, I gently redirected it. Your divorce wasn't about right or wrong, Helen. It was about irreconcilable differences. As for me, if I had been more independent and assertive, maybe I wouldn't have been taken advantage of the way I was. But in the end, it's better to focus on the future. That day we talked at length, and I noticed the way Helen's gaze toward me changed, filled with increasing respect and perhaps even admiration. Later, Trainer Sue approached me privately. "Helen seems to be paying a lot of attention to you. Do you think he's interested in something more?" I laughed at the suggestion. Helen Grant is an experienced and pragmatic businessman. He has countless options. If he's paying attention to me, it's not because of romance. He's evaluating me. He wants to see if I have the ambition to rise higher in his world. I knew that successful men like Helen held those around them to incredibly high standards. But after everything I had been through, I no longer had the energy or the desire to meet such expectations. I had already lost one life, and this second chance was about independence and freedom, not illusions about men. Just as things were finally looking up for me, trouble came knocking. One afternoon, after finishing a workout with Trainer Sue, I was suddenly ambushed by Ryan's mother, Mrs. Chun Farrow, in the middle of a busy shopping district. During rush hour, surrounded by a crowd, she grabbed me by the hair and screamed, "Jessica! No wonder you abandoned your son. You're using Ryan's money to support your boy toy. You shameless tramp." I yanked myself free and snapped back, "Mrs. Chun, your son cheated on me, and we are divorced. How is this any of your business?" The onlookers began whispering, their eyes darting between us, which only made Mrs. Chun's fury intensify. Her eyes quickly scanned the surroundings before turning to Ethan, who had been standing nearby. She motioned frantically, calling out, "Ethan, tell her we came to see her." "What kind of mother abandons her child like that?" she demanded. "Even if you're divorced, you still have a responsibility to care for your son." I responded coldly, "How have I neglected him? I send child support every month on time." Mrs. Chun clutched her chest in exaggerated distress, wailing as if possessed. "That little money barely covers anything," she sobbed. "You should visit him every week if you have time to chase after men. Why don't you care about your son?" Her words seemed to stir the sympathy of those around, and she played the role with even more flair, spitting as she continued her rant. She painted me as a heartless, selfish woman who had abandoned her family to indulge in a reckless lifestyle. Trainer Sue, unable to endure the slander any longer, stepped forward and grabbed Mrs. Chun's arm, speaking firmly, "Apologize to her, or I'll sue you for defamation." I stepped aside, watching Ethan, who had been keeping his head lowered throughout the exchange. I spoke deliberately. "Mrs. Chun, it's only been a few days and you've truly become a shrew. Don't forget, you take pride in being the most modern and carefree grandma, even the lead dancer in your group. Don't do something so disgraceful." Ethan, ever conscious of his image, could never align himself with his grandmother's public drama. His face darkened as he grabbed Mrs. Chun's arm, muttering, "Grandma, why bother with this performance? She doesn't care about me, but one day she'll grow old too." Then, turning to face me, he said with defiance, "What are you so proud of? When I grow up, I won't acknowledge you. When you're old and bedridden, I'll pull out your oxygen tube." The crowd gasped, the atmosphere shifting instantly. Mrs. Chun was so enraged that her lips twitched, and she nearly choked on her breath. I fought to suppress my laughter. My naive son had no idea how fragile his grandmother appeared after only a few days apart. If she hadn't been truly desperate, why else would she come here, blocking my way and demanding that I return to care for him? I watched Ethan storm off with determined steps, my gaze fixed on his retreating figure for a long moment. "Son, keep being exactly who you are," I thought. Later, I apologized to Trainer Sue, who was staring at me with disbelief. He pointed to the departing figure and asked, "That's your son?" I nodded calmly. "Yes. My biological son." He was left speechless for a moment, still processing. I gave him a faint smile, said goodbye, and left. "It's nothing," I said to myself. Having lived through this once, I had come to understand that while family love can be unconditional, the world is not short of heartless mothers or ungrateful sons. In my past life, I would never have believed that the son I had raised with such care could hate me so deeply. Each time Ethan broke my heart, I comforted myself by thinking he was just young and didn't understand. If I taught him more, he would change. But no matter how much I sacrificed or how much effort I put into raising him, he never learned to appreciate others or show gratitude. He inherited the cold, selfish nature of Ryan's family and made it worse, becoming so bold he no longer even bothered to hide it. I had hoped that the incident might bring some peace, but instead, more problems followed. First, Helen subtly asked if I had fully resolved my issues with my previous marriage and offered his help if needed. My heart sank. He must have heard rumors. Then, the following day, Ryan showed up at the training center where I was taking classes. He scanned me up and down, as if trying to confirm something. "Jessica, it really is you," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. Once sure, he looked at me with a mix of surprise and satisfaction. I brushed invisible dust off my shoulder and smirked coldly. Only then did he snap out of it, his voice turning sneering. "No wonder you don't want custody of Ethan," he said. "Divorce suits you. I bet you've been seeing someone else for a while now. Have you seen a psychiatrist for that paranoia?" I scoffed. He continued bitterly, "You look decent now that you've slimmed down and managed to catch Helen Grant's attention. But don't get your hopes up. He'd never be interested in someone like you. There are plenty of younger women in his company." At that moment, I realized Ryan must have been spreading rumors about me to Helen. I pulled him into a corner and, lowering my voice, asked, "What exactly are you trying to do, Ryan?" He smirked smugly. "What do you think? Ruin your fun. You threw Ethan at me so you could live it up." I took a deep breath, refusing to waste any more energy on him. "Fine," I said coldly. "Say what you came to say. What is it you and your mother want from me?" Ryan's expression shifted to one of triumph. "Come home with me," he said. "There's something we need to discuss." "You think divorce is a game?" I asked. "We're divorced, Ryan." He was unfazed, clearly prepared. Taking out his phone, he showed me a video. On the screen, a woman's shrill voice screamed, "Get out, you bastard! If you die out there, don't come back." I grabbed the phone from him, my hands trembling. The video showed the chaos in Ryan's living room. A child wailed heartbreakingly on the couch, while a disheveled woman yanked a man's hair, pushing him toward the door. She looked completely unhinged. The man pleaded meekly, "Honey, I was wrong. Let me see the child. Please. He's crying so much." "Get out," the woman yelled. "Don't come back. My son and I don't need you." I couldn't watch any longer. My body trembled, cold from head to toe. "When did you install surveillance cameras in the house?" I shouted. Ryan replied without hesitation, "Jessica, I've got plenty of videos of you losing it. Breaking down. Acting ugly. What do you think would happen if I sent these to Helen Grant? Do you think he'd still look at you the same way?" I closed my eyes tightly, trying to suppress my emotions. "Fine," I said coldly. I silently got into Ryan's car, not saying a word. As I gazed out the window, I thought I had left my past behind, that I had moved on. But seeing the footage of those painful moments, the struggle, and the heartache brought it all rushing back, leaving me trembling. Anyone watching that footage would label me as a cruel, cold-hearted woman, indifferent to my child and unreasonable toward my husband. But they wouldn't know the full story. The video was taken when Ethan was just 5 and battling a severe case of pneumonia. My mother-in-law helped for a day before finding an excuse to leave for her dance group. Ryan was unreachable, absorbed in work, ignoring my desperate calls. I spent 4 days and nights tending to Ethan alone, trying to comfort him through relentless coughing, pleading with doctors and nurses for help, and being scolded when I couldn't follow instructions to the letter. I couldn't sleep, terrified he might stop breathing in the night. On the 4th day, Ryan finally returned. My exhaustion, frustration, and despair boiled over, culminating in the scene that ended up on tape. What I didn't know was that Ryan had installed surveillance cameras, not to assist but to spy, collecting footage of my worst moments to use against me later. His betrayal went far beyond cheating. The anger surged through me, my body trembling with rage. Ryan, unaware of my fury, reached over and placed his hand on my thigh. He said with insincere sweetness, "Honey, come back. I didn't realize until you were gone how much this family needs you." Trying to suppress my disgust, I responded coldly, "And Donna?" He smirked and said, "She's not an issue. She's older, and her pregnancy isn't stable. We haven't even registered our marriage yet." I couldn't take it anymore. I slapped him hard across the face. "Scum," I spat. When we arrived at Ryan's house, the overwhelming smell of neglected trash and stagnant air hit me. Ethan sat on the couch playing video games with a girl his age. She giggled while holding his dirty foot. "Ethan, you're amazing. You have to play with me all the time." "Okay," Ethan replied smugly. "I'm climbing the ranks. Pretty impressive, right? Look, Jessica, Ethan and little Action are getting along so well," Mrs. Chun said loudly, clearly to provoke me. Donna, lounging on the couch with a bag of sunflower seeds, chimed in. "Mom, this place is such a mess. I keep tripping over everything." Mrs. Chun sighed heavily and tossed the rag aside. "Jessica, from now on, you need to come here once a week to clean and cook for the week. That way, you won't have to pay child support for Ethan," Donna added smugly. "I heard you're trying to apply for the position of Helen Grant's housekeeper. He's been looking for someone for over 6 months but hasn't found anyone suitable." Ethan, dropping his phone, sneered, "You're pathetic. I thought you'd change after the divorce, but you're just going to be someone else's maid." Ryan, clearly enjoying this, added mockingly, "Think of it as doing something for your son. We're not asking for much. Just once a week." It hit me then. This entire family wanted to keep exploiting me for free labor. Mrs. Chun tried to hide her discomfort, mumbling, "Coming 4 times a month for $1,000 isn't bad for you." "Exactly," I replied coolly. "It's better than before when I was on call 24/7, taking care of the child, cooking, and running the household. It's definitely an improvement." I didn't argue further but pretended to be confused. "But why not just keep the maid? You're paying $300 a month." Mrs. Chun looked away, but Ethan blurted out, "We've already gone through 7 or 8 maids. None of them were good enough. They refused to do this or that. I don't understand why a maid is so arrogant." Suppressing my irritation, I turned to Ethan. "Ethan, do you want your mom to return as your maid, serving your father and stepmother? Have you ever thought about how your mom feels about this?" He shrugged dismissively. "You're going to be a maid anyway, so why not just do it at home? At least no one will laugh at you for it." I threw my hair back and steadied myself. My cold, selfish son had never failed to disappoint me. "Unfortunately, you can't afford me now," I replied with a sigh. "If you're willing to pay $5,000 a month, maybe I'll reconsider." Donna laughed mockingly. "Know your place," she sneered. Ethan's eyes widened. "You're worth that much?" Ryan, with a threatening tone, added, "Even if you get the job, you won't last." "Mark my words." "We'll see," I replied curtly, unwilling to waste more time. I turned to leave. This place isn't just filthy. So are the people. Watch out. A disaster is brewing in this family, and I'm not cleaning it up. Having learned that Ryan had been keeping surveillance footage to use against me, I decided to take control. I planned to meet with Helen Grant, but only after the formal interview. I wanted him to see my skills first and evaluate me without bias. On the day of the interview, there were 10 candidates, including some young, attractive women and multilingual international students. I silently congratulated myself for choosing this career path so decisively. The interview went exactly as I expected. The younger, prettier candidates lacked my efficiency and resilience. They hesitated when faced with tougher tasks, while the older candidates didn't have my education or skills. I had no personal distractions, which meant I could devote myself fully to the role. Helen's daughter, Sweetie, was delighted with my trial tutoring session, saying, "Dad, she's way better than my school teachers. She makes everything so easy to understand and fun. We should hire her. She's amazing at every subject." Helen didn't make an immediate decision, but told us to wait for his response the next day. Later, I ran into him at the gym and invited him to dinner after his workout. Over dinner, I deliberately ordered a bottle of red wine. With the wine giving me courage, I took a deep breath and asked, "Did you happen to see any videos of me?" He didn't shy away from the question. "Donna had sent me some clips, but I wanted to hear your perspective." I finished my glass of wine, trying to steady myself. Then, with a calm and measured voice, I recounted the hardships I had faced during my years in Ryan's household. The controlling mother-in-law who took pleasure in undermining me, the self-centered ex-husband who avoided responsibility while pretending to be the perfect man, and their constant efforts to turn Ethan against me with petty bribes. My ex-husband, who prided himself on belittling me, was the embodiment of toxic masculinity. Conceited and arrogant, my son, raised under his influence, came to share his disdain for me, his mother. Over the course of our marriage, I had lived like a trapped animal, battered and scarred, only capable of weak roars, breakdowns, and moments of utter despair. I wiped my eyes and offered a bitter smile to Helen Grant. It was pitiful and laughable, but I was a mess back then. There's no denying it. Helen listened quietly, his demeanor composed and patient. He handed me his handkerchief and replaced my wine with tea. I could tell this was a mark of his upbringing. A true gentleman. I appreciated the space he'd given me to explain myself. Years of repressed pain and exhaustion came flooding out, and I cried for about 10 minutes before I could pull myself together. I wasn't sure if Helen fully understood or accepted my explanation, but at this point, I no longer cared. Having been pushed into this situation, I knew I wouldn't let Donna and Ryan get away with their schemes. After gathering my thoughts, I spoke firmly. "Mr. Grant, I know being a mistress isn't a credential for employment, but Donna has consistently abused her position for personal gain. Not only did she manipulate me in the past, but she's also invading my privacy now, trying to force me back into servitude for their family. You don't have to hire me, but I urge you to seriously reconsider Donna's character." I took a deep breath, then, in addition to the incriminating video, I presented him with a series of conversations between Donna and Ryan. These included records of Donna bribing the procurement manager at H Group to favor Ryan's company, resulting in H Group purchasing substandard products at inflated prices. "Here are the source suppliers' price lists," I explained. "Ryan's company is a third-tier distributor, and thanks to Donna's interference, H Group has incurred at least $300,000 in extra costs over the past year." Helen looked at the documents, set them down gently, and tapped his fingers on the table. His sharp gaze fixed on me. "Jessica," he asked suddenly, "was your self-recommendation just a way to set all of this up?" I stared at him, stunned, realizing what he was suggesting. Helen thought I had approached him with a premeditated plan to exact revenge on Ryan and Donna. My hands clenched in anger as I spoke. "Mr. Grant, I understand why you'd think that, but let me clarify. First, I chose this career after careful consideration, and I respect my profession deeply. I've worked hard to excel in it. Second, my issues with Ryan and Donna ended when our divorce was finalized. If they hadn't pushed me to this point, you wouldn't be hearing any of this now." Helen studied me intently for a long moment before breaking the tension with a teasing tone. "Even if I'm losing hundreds of thousands each year, you're telling me it's none of your concern?" I hesitated before answering truthfully. "That's right. I'm not some self-appointed hero of justice. I'm just a woman who knows how to stand up for my own rights. If Ryan and Donna hadn't provoked me, I wouldn't have gone out of my way to create enemies. Cutting off someone's income is as serious as taking a life. But let's not forget, H Group's losses also stem from internal mismanagement, including poor staffing choices." "So, Mr. Grant, you really don't need to thank me." Helen's calm demeanor cracked into a rare smile. "Relax," he said. "This has nothing to do with you personally. Besides, as a businessman, I wouldn't let something so trivial cloud my judgment." I smiled back. "I'm just glad you don't misunderstand me." Helen concluded the conversation gracefully. "I understand everything clearly. Thank you for your honesty, Jessica." Despite his words, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. No employer would willingly hire a housekeeper prone to emotional breakdowns and volatility. Nevertheless, I refused to be discouraged. I had already prepared myself for the worst outcome. That night, I updated my resume and sent it to several well-known domestic management agencies. I wasn't going to rely on just one opportunity. Helen's response to Donna's actions was swift and decisive. She was fired immediately, and a legal notice was issued demanding compensation for the damages caused by her abuse of power during her time in the role. It was then that I realized the full extent of Donna's misuse of her position as HR manager. She had been involved in more than just bribery to benefit Ryan. The compensation claims alone could financially ruin her, potentially even leading to jail time. As for Ryan, he was disqualified as a supplier to H Group, though most of the blame fell on Donna. This spared Ryan's business from collapsing entirely, but his losses were still considerable. Donna slunk back to Ryan's home to focus on her pregnancy. Meanwhile, I received an unexpected job offer from Helen Grant. To my surprise, he not only hired me but also offered a $1,000 raise to apologize for his earlier misunderstanding. My new salary was $6,000 per month. Strangely, I hesitated. Could I really thrive under such a shrewd employer? But Helen, ever the clever negotiator, pitched his offer smoothly. Jessica, I might not be offering the highest salary, but I can assure you, my household will be the easiest you'll find. This was an offer I couldn't refuse, especially for someone new to the field. Working for a single father like Helen was an ideal opportunity. I didn't disappoint him. My work ethic, skills, and proactive attitude gave him peace of mind. Our collaboration was smooth, and I genuinely enjoyed my role. The next time I encountered Ryan's family, it was outside Helen's gated community. The security guard informed me that a rowdy group was demanding to see me. I felt relieved knowing I had chosen Helen as my employer. His work schedule and the children's school hours left my afternoons free, providing the perfect opportunity to handle the Ryans before heading out. I intentionally wore designer clothes and shoes, carrying an LV bag. Money had ceased to be a problem for me ever since I took on the role of managing the Grant household. I became involved in the Homeowners Association, forging connections with other residents and their staff. In fact, I even brokered a few deals, using my divorce settlement to invest in a small domestic services company. Many of the villa residents were now my clients. Helen was fully aware of my business ventures and supported me, as long as my responsibilities with the family remained unaffected. After Sweetie's academic performance improved during my probation period, Helen voluntarily extended my contract for 10 years, trusting that I wouldn't leave. This trust motivated me to work even harder. When I arrived at the gate, the security guard captain immediately came over and said, "Miss Jessica, there's someone claiming to be your son causing a scene and insisting on seeing you." I apologized and approached the group. Ryan greeted me warmly, stepping forward enthusiastically. "Hey," he paused, taking a good look at me, then awkwardly corrected himself. "Jessica." I chuckled coldly, still not fully awake. "Ryan," I muttered, feigning innocence. He smiled weakly and nudged Ethan forward. "Go on, Ethan. Call her Mom." Ethan hesitated, disbelief in his eyes. "Are you really my mom?" I studied him silently. He had put on weight, his face was swollen and oily, with dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, looking like they hadn't been washed in days. He looked completely disheveled and lethargic. When I didn't respond, Ethan frowned and muttered, "I heard you're working as a maid for some rich guy." I corrected him. "Actually, I'm a professional house manager." "You're old enough now to understand that. Stay current, Donna." Resting a hand on her visibly pregnant belly, she sneered bitterly. "Big sister, I heard you're making $6,000 a month now," she said. "That's more than some senior executives earn." Mrs. Chun gasped loudly. $6,000 a month, she exclaimed, her voice rising. At that moment, the security guard captain turned to Donna and commented, "You look at least 10 years older than Miss Jessica. Calling her big sister seems a bit generous, don't you think?" I couldn't help but laugh. Donna touched her face, her expression shifting between anger and embarrassment. Without her executive title or any savings, her arrogance had clearly diminished. Mrs. Chun's eyes widened as she stormed toward me, saying, "You're making $6,000 a month, but you're only paying $1,000 in child support? That's unacceptable." She continued, "At least give us $5,000, and keep just $1,000 for yourself. That's more than enough for a woman." Her audacity made me laugh out loud. It was the first time I truly understood how ignorant and greedy my mother-in-law was at her core. Do you think that just because I was once your daughter-in-law, you can control my entire life? I asked coldly. She faltered, momentarily speechless. Then, glancing at Ethan, she grabbed him by the arm and said, "And what about Ethan? Even though you're divorced, you're still his mother. If you're not giving him the money, who else should get it?" I turned my gaze to Ethan. Although he resented me, he was old enough to know right from wrong. He avoided my eyes, shrinking behind Mrs. Chun and muttering, "Give the money to Grandma to keep, and I'll still acknowledge you." "No need," I replied icily. "I'm not your mother anymore." Ethan froze, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment. "What's so great about you?" he snapped. "You're just a maid making $6,000 a month. Do you think people are stupid? You must be someone's mistress." "I don't want your dirty money." This child was beyond saving. Ryan awkwardly scratched his nose, trying to lighten the mood. "Jessica, don't take it personally. Ethan's just trying to say you look great now." "I had no idea you were this capable." Ignoring his insincere flattery, I turned to Mrs. Chun and said firmly, "What I earn has nothing to do with any of you. The divorce agreement explicitly states that I'm not allowed to see Ethan, so don't try to use him to threaten me. And as for you, Ryan, don't ever show your face in front of me again. Didn't the slap in the car last time hurt enough?" Donna's face darkened as she grabbed Ryan's ear, demanding, "What does she mean by that? Are you regretting things now that she's rich and beautiful? Are you planning to dump me after ruining my career?" Ryan frantically tried to calm her down, stammering out excuses. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chun, realizing I wasn't going to negotiate, pushed Ethan toward me and declared, "Fine, if you won't pay, then take Ethan with you. Don't think you can live a good life while we suffer." Their shamelessness almost amused me. I turned to Ethan and asked, "So, this is the plan you all came up with together?" Ethan's face twisted as he looked around, then suddenly grabbed my hand and started crying. "Mom, Dad, and Grandma don't care about me at all. They only care about the baby Donna's carrying. Once he's born, I'll have no place in this family." I stared at him silently, observing his performance. He wiped his tears dramatically and pointed at Donna. "Mom, she's awful. She secretly talks badly about me behind Grandma and Dad's back, says I'm useless, and only cares about her daughter. She even sneaks her daughter extra allowance while I get nothing. Life at home is terrible." "Ethan, you've changed," I said with a faint smile. "You've learned how to act now. But honestly, I preferred the old you, the one with some spine. Don't make me lose respect for you." His face turned red, and reluctantly, he released my hand, still muttering, "Mom, I don't understand what you're saying." I couldn't be bothered to respond. Instead, I turned to the security guard captain and said, "Call the police. They're here to extort me." I warned coldly, "Don't ever use Ethan to threaten me again. If you continue treating the divorce agreement as a joke, I'll make sure Ryan's little company doesn't survive." Sweat broke out on Ryan's forehead. "Was Donna's situation your doing?" he stammered. I smirked faintly. "Ryan, with all your flaws, do you really think I need to do anything underhanded to ruin you?" Ryan clenched his teeth and pointed a trembling finger at me. "Jessica, you've got some nerve," he said. "Let's see how long you can stay smug." Noticing that the security captain had already contacted the police, Ryan swiftly pulled his family away. Ethan, furious over his defeat and humiliated by my actions, suddenly pushed me forcefully. "You're a cruel woman," he spat. "Go to hell. I'm done with you. You're nothing but a filthy maid, not even worthy of carrying my dad's shoes. So what if you've got some dirty money now?" He sneered. Disgusting. Taken off guard, I staggered in my high heels, twisting my ankle sharply. Pain shot through my leg, but I bit my lip and stood my ground. "As long as you stay away from me, you'll never see me again," I said coldly. The family stormed off in fury, though by then I had long decided to give up on Ethan. Today had only confirmed how deeply he was shaped by his upbringing. His disdain for me had been instilled in him from a young age, largely due to Ryan and Mrs. Chun. His earlier tears and pleas were nothing more than an attempt to manipulate me for his own benefit. The moment he realized his plan was exposed, his true feelings came out with full force. His insults were raw and sincere, if anything. I had to admit that Ryan and Mrs. Chun had succeeded in raising Ethan exactly as they intended. Selfish, cold, and ungrateful. However, Ethan's accusations about Donna were likely not untrue. I could only wait for the day when their dysfunctional family dynamics completely unraveled. When Helen Grant learned of the incident, he quietly wondered, should I deal with Ryan? I can make a call, and his career as a distributor will be over in no time. People like him don't last long in this industry if I speak up. I shook my head. Forget it. He's still Ethan's father. And if I ruin him completely, I'll just end up stuck with Ethan. I'm not that foolish. Helen nodded understandingly, then asked about my injury. How's your leg? Should I call the family doctor? It's nothing, I answered quickly. Ethan's just a kid. He doesn't have that much strength. It doesn't bother me. I was more concerned that you might blame me for bringing trouble to your doorstep. At that moment, Sweetie, who had been sitting nearby, suddenly spoke up. Dad, you like Aunt Jessica, don't you? I think Aunt Jessica is way better than those flashy women outside. Helen chuckled, lightly tapping Sweetie on the head. Don't be cheeky, he said, but he didn't deny it. Flustered, I quickly changed the subject. The thought of being with Helen? No way. He was too shrewd, too calculated. A relationship with him would be exhausting. After this incident, the Ryans kept a low profile for a while. During the summer, I took Sweetie on a trip abroad. When we returned, shocking news awaited me. Donna had miscarried. Ethan had dropped out of school and ended up in juvenile detention. Ryan's business collapsed due to Donna's revenge. The entire family was now living off their dwindling savings, their household in chaos and out of options. Donna eventually sought Helen's help to return to her job at the company. That's when I learned the full story. As Donna's pregnancy progressed, her attention shifted away from Ethan, favoring her daughter. Frequent clashes occurred between them, mostly over games and trivial matters. Without anyone to mediate, the home became a battleground. Mrs. Chun and Ryan's solution was to escape the chaos and leave for a peaceful getaway. With no supervision, Donna's bias toward her daughter worsened. This only fueled Ethan's resentment, and the situation escalated when financial stress hit the family. Donna refused Ethan's request for takeout and in-game purchases. Enraged, he sought revenge. While Donna was at a prenatal checkup, Ethan bullied her daughter, which escalated into violence. When Donna returned and discovered what happened, she confronted Ethan, and a physical fight ensued, with Ethan seething with hatred for the unborn child who had taken his place in the family. In a fit of rage, Ethan deliberately kicked Donna in the stomach, causing her to lose the baby. By the time Mrs. Chun and Ryan rushed back to clean up the mess, it was too late. Donna not only lost her baby but also faced her daughter, crying and demanding to leave the toxic household. Furious, Donna insisted on reporting Ethan to the police. Ryan, with their youngest son gone, naturally sided with Ethan, threatening Donna with divorce if she pressed charges. The once loving couple, who had schemed relentlessly to be together, were now bitter enemies. Donna, determined to make Ethan pay, succeeded in having him sent to juvenile detention. With gritted teeth, she declared, "He ruined my daughter's life, so I'll make sure he carries a criminal record for the rest of his." Helen Grant, still considering Donna's previous contributions as a senior employee, and sympathizing with her daughter's plight, offered Donna a regular staff position elsewhere. Yet, Donna turned on me with a venomous glare. "It's all your fault. Jessica, if you had taken Ethan with you back then, none of this would have happened. My daughter wouldn't have been hurt," she accused. "You're a heartless mother. How dare you live so beautifully now when your son is a criminal? This is your doing." Her hysterical accusations startled me, but I remained composed. Donna had no right to blame me for this. The law would hold Ethan accountable for his actions. But as for her, I looked at her with disdain and said sharply, "Back then, you were so desperate to marry Ryan that you encouraged your daughter to cozy up to his family. Especially Ethan. You put a teenage boy and girl under the same roof during such a vulnerable time in their lives. As a mother, did you ever think about protecting your daughter?" I pitied her. Donna staggered back, momentarily speechless. I took a step closer, my tone unwavering. "What? Did you think I should have let you manipulate me, clearing every obstacle for your perfect little life? Think again." Her face turned a deep shade of red, a mix of humiliation and fury, as though she had been caught red-handed. Helen, who had been observing silently, finally sighed. Disappointment flickered in his eyes. Donna, all of this is your own doing. Even now, you still think it's someone else's fault. I have to say, your character leaves much to be desired. He was ready to withdraw his job offer on the spot, but I intervened. Let it go, I said quietly. Consider it atonement for my son's sins. I didn't pity Donna, no matter how miserable her situation was, but divorced, unemployed, and disgraced. I couldn't help but wonder what would become of her daughter. Donna, as ungrateful as always, shot me a spiteful glare before storming off in humiliation. I spent a long time in my room, lost in thought, until Helen knocked softly and entered. Are you worried about your son? He asked with genuine concern. I gave him a faint, distracted smile and shook my head. No, not at all. In fact, I think this outcome is just fine. Helen raised an eyebrow, curiosity evident, but I wasn't concerned with his opinion of me. To put it bluntly, I continued, if I had fought for custody back then, I'd probably be in a worse position than Donna today. At least she still has her life. Helen studied me for a moment before sitting beside me. After a brief silence he asked unexpectedly, Jessica, what do you think of Sweetie's suggestion? It only took me a second to grasp what he meant, and I responded playfully, Mr. Grant, are you trying to avoid paying $6,000 a month for a house manager? Helen chuckled, shaking his head in mild exasperation. Of course, someone as wealthy as him wouldn't care about such a sum, especially considering what he'd shared about his reasons for divorcing his ex-wife. I suspected he was searching for a partner who prioritized family above all else, but that wasn't me. I had my own career, and working as his house manager was merely the first step in my professional plans. Helen, I said with a knowing smile, for two seasoned professionals like us, taking that step forward wouldn't be easy, don't you think? He sighed softly, a hint of regret in his voice. Yes, it would be quite difficult. I nodded silently in agreement. Over time, I had noticed Helen Grant's growing affection for me. His kindness, patience, and subtle attempts to explore the potential of our relationship. But as he had acknowledged, moving forward would be incredibly challenging. Having just freed myself from a marriage where I was reduced to little more than a housekeeper, I couldn't step into another relationship under similar circumstances. If it didn't work out, I thought, I could always walk away, pay the hefty penalty for breaking my contract, and move on. With that mindset, I composed myself and, out of duty and principle, went to the juvenile detention center to visit Ethan. He had lost a lot of weight, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by one of defeat. His arms and face bore faint bruises, evidence of the harsh lessons he had been enduring. When he saw me, he instinctively moved closer, his eyes shining with a mixture of tears and joy. But as soon as his hand reached out to touch me, he hesitated and pulled it back. I stood silently, observing him. Despite a small flicker of pity, I found his current appearance far less repulsive than the entitled, arrogant boy he used to be. Mom, he whispered softly, his voice tinged with anxiety and awkwardness, like a lost puppy desperate for affection but afraid of being rejected. I was wrong. Please scold me, he muttered, bowing his head deeply, his hands twisting nervously. For a brief moment, a faint stir of emotion moved in my heart, but I quickly pushed it aside and said coldly, I won't scold you, nor will I care for you. You're not worth it. Tears immediately streamed down his face. Mom, I truly know I was wrong. I realize now that only you ever loved me. It was Grandma and Dad. They kept saying terrible things about you, poisoning me against you. I never wanted to reject you, Mom. I scoffed, a quiet laugh escaping me. He looked at me, puzzled by my reaction. Ethan, oh Ethan, I said with a bitter smile. You're the type of person who swears loyalty to whoever takes care of you. Your dad might be a scumbag, but at least he stood up to Donna for your sake. And here you are, shifting the blame as soon as it's convenient. I shook my head in disappointment. I had to admit that my son was inherently ungrateful, a trait deeply ingrained in him. Focus on your rehabilitation, I said flatly, turning away without looking back. This felt like closure, a way to finally put to rest the bitterness and regret that had weighed on me in my previous life. The chains that had bound me for so long were broken, and the Jessica of today no longer feared the future.